Luxury should never come at the cost of safety. The National Consumer Commission has announced the recall of several high-end vehicles, including Range Rover Evoques from 2021 through to 2025 and various 2023 Mercedes-Benz models due to potentially life-threatening defects. Airbags that may tear, electrical failures and a heightened risk of fires raise urgent consumer safety concerns. We now speak to Prudence Moilwa, Head of Complaints at the National Consumer Commission. Prudence, always good to speak to you. Now, let's be frank. How do improperly folded airbags still pass quality checks in 2025? Isn't this a basic life-critical flaw?
It is a flaw. And I think by their own admission, and that's why this recall is happening, it does look like it was not properly folded, and the torn airbag may reduce the occupant protection when the tearing happens during deployment. So from our side, we're actually very happy that they are informing us so that we can warn consumers to take back the vehicles, as well as ensure that, when the airbag does deploy, it is safe. And I think equally, the ones of Mercedes-Benz, as well as you say, these high-end vehicles, there is a problem with the fuse box, which might have been not reworked as intended. So we want the consumers just to be alive to the fact that product recalls is an international phenomenon. Products do fail at times, but I think also as the Commission, we are concerned about just the quality of vehicles and the things that, you wonder whether, they have enough or adequate checks and balances during production.
That's the sort of question you normally wouldn't hear when you're talking about Mercedes-Benz or Range Rover, because these are high-end luxury vehicles.
Yes. And I think, the misnomer to say that perhaps only cheaper vehicles have problems, even the high-end ones, this type of thing does happen. And I must say also that, consumers are not responding at the level at which we would want them, because we are monitoring the recalls, and we are aware that in some instances, suppliers have informed consumers, but they are not bringing in the vehicles. We would like to sensitize consumers that this is a safety critical recall and they need to take back these vehicles for them to be fixed.
All right, Prudence, let's talk a little bit about liability. And I raise this question because you've talked about messages and certain information that's gone out to consumers for them to bring back their vehicles. Now, I'd imagine that up to this point, liability rests with Mercedes-Benz or Range Rover if an event does occur. Yes. What happens in the instance where a notice has gone out to a consumer or a purchaser of one of these vehicles? They have confirmed receipt but have not acted, and then an event occurs?
Those are some of the dynamics that we are trying not to have to deal with in the future, where maybe in the event of an eventuality of this kind of event happening, and then, the motor vehicle suppliers can then raise it as a defense to say we did try to mitigate the risk and the consumers did not respond. However, in terms of Section 61 of the Consumer Protection Act, that is not an excuse. As and when there is a safety concern and it is your product, you are fully liable for whatever damages that can come from a product that you have produced. And that is why even when we have discussions with suppliers, we say to them, the safety critical issues do not have a time limit. If your car, because of the design or a failure in the product, happens even after 10 years, even after it is out of warranty, it is still your responsibility. And I think this now, it's starting to bring to life the fact that, they can't continue making this kind of mistakes or, miss some safety critical issues during production. So more emphasis need to be placed on, the checks and balances during production to make sure that we avoid this type of issues. I would also imagine that it comes at a high cost to have to take back the vehicles and fix them and do a replacement for the airbags or even for the fuse box itself, because it also costs them in the end. So they might want to also, and I hope they are listening, want to spend more time during research development as well as production to make sure that there aren't these product failures, and so that consumers do not have to be inconvenienced with taking back the vehicles for them to be fixed.
So I want to go back to the consumers, the ones that aren't responding. And and suggests that part of this process might be because of the inconvenience. Just walk us through, Prudence, that process. So I own a Mercedes-Benz vehicle, or I own a Range Rover, and has been recalled. I take it across to the nearest Range Rover dealer. What then happens? Do they give me a replacement vehicle? Are they paying for my cost to get there? What is that process?
Yeah, so the process is similar to the same process that one would get when they bring in their vehicles for a service. So because it's not going to take a long time to do this. So the parts are already there. Consumers need to then book in their vehicles to get this service, which is free, by the way, to fix this safety critical features. They would then take in their vehicles. In the event, obviously, we know that they would then be dropped off wherever they need to. Just the same kind of procedure and process as when you take in your vehicle for a service, that would also be followed. So if they do give you that kind of vehicles to use during the day or whatever, depending on whatever service, that they usually do during a normal, intermittent service for a vehicle, they would then do the same for this to be able to also fix this safety critical issues.
And what happens to consumers who no longer trust their vehicles or trust that particular brand? What protections exist beyond just free repairs?
Yeah, you see, the challenge is because this is meant to mitigate the risks, right? So when you look at, for example, the issue of the airbag, there hasn't been an accident, there hasn't been any deployment. What they're doing now is actually the responsible thing of fixing something before the accident actually happens. So in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, consumers are only entitled to redress when the product failure occurs or when something is wrong. They can maybe bring an argument about the quality of the vehicle, but also when we look at the fact that suppliers are upfront to say, look, we've picked up that there's a problem, we're going to fix it with, manufacturer-specific parts that would not affect your warranty in terms of the manufacturer's warranty. It is the view of the Commission that we shouldn't then create chaos by saying consumers must return their vehicles for another vehicle, or even the inconvenience of cancelling an ongoing contract. We also understand that cancelling a credit agreement for those that have bought this vehicle through a credit agreement would talk to issues of interest, the fact that you've already used the vehicle, those kind of things. So it's not necessarily meant to create chaos or even create a situation of unjustified enrichment. So we still look at the fact that you've used the vehicle, those kilometers that you've traveled, that you've taken out value from the vehicle would still be. So we want them to understand it within the context of product recalls. Product recalls are legal in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. And as I said, it's an international phenomenon. It happens in all countries, basically to ensure that suppliers have a chance to fix the problems that they pick up themselves in order to mitigate the risks in the marketplace.
And finally, Prudence, what sort of numbers are we talking about in terms of these recalls from both the Range Rover and Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah, so I do not necessarily have the numbers just yet, but I think because we are talking about between 2021 and 2022 and certain 2025 models, consumers who drive these vehicles should, punch in their VIN numbers in the platforms that are available on the website, or even call in, or even have, make contact with the suppliers or the accredited dealerships to find out whether their vehicles are concerned. The most important thing is the VIN number, because that's a unique number of the vehicles that are affected. So we don't have the specific numbers. In the past, we've also picked up that they would say maybe 56 vehicles. In the overall scheme of things, we might find out that it's more numbers. So we're not necessarily just focusing on the numbers. We would want consumers to then check whether their vehicles are involved.
Prudence Moilwa is Head of Complaints and Investigations at the National Consumer Commission. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us and highlighting the urgency for those product recalls, Range Rover Evoques and Mercedes-Benz vehicles, and encouraging consumers to go to the nearest dealer as soon as possible.